for me.
Good morning. Thank you for braving Saturday morning and coming out. For the few who don't know me, I'm Ron Curry. I'm the CEO of the Interactive Games and Entertainment Association. This will be our 9th iteration of New Zealand Plays, although we've changed the name a couple of times, and we'll go through that when Jeff does a presentation. We've been doing this now for 15 years. And for those who don't really know IGEA, we represent game publishers, distributors and developers in Australia. And about 15 years ago, we merged with the ISANs, who used to be in New Zealand, who looked after publishers and distributors as well. So we tend to focus on a lot of the policy work in New Zealand that sits outside of funding. So things like the social media ban, or the work that's been done around social media, will be interfacing with the government here, as well as issues around classification, copyright, IP, AI, etc. I'm going to introduce Professor Brand in a moment. Well, I just did, I guess, from Bond University, who's been doing these reports for us. During the presentation, feel free to stop Jeff anytime, because I will be, because he does keep talking a lot. He's a uni lecturer. But if you have a question, please just yell it out. We'll have some mics, but if Jeff can hear you, I'll answer the question for you. And after the presentation, we're doing a bit of a Q&A just outside here. So if you want to stick around and ask some questions, please do that. So I'll let Jeff kick it off.
Thank you very much, Ron. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to New Zealand Plays. As Ron said, we've been doing this research for many years, and I'm delighted to share with you the latest findings from the research series. And I want to start by thanking you for coming out on a Saturday morning. There's no better way to start at 8:30 Saturday than to talk about stats, right? Otherwise, for those of you who are in the room, thanks for coming. For those of you who will watch on the recording, thank you very much for spending the time and engaging with us in this research. So, as Ron said, this is the 9th in the series of research studies. We've changed the names over the years just to recognize different concepts and different ways in which we're talking about games. It is a great pleasure that we've been involved with the New Zealand Game Developers Association Conference, and it's really great and an honor to be back and talking again about what was Interactive New Zealand, then Digital New Zealand, then New Zealand Plays. And as you can see over time, we've changed up the art, and as you'll see, we've changed up the focus. I want to just call out to the production in this. So, in addition to the large number of Kiwis who responded to the survey, each spending, between 10 and 20 minutes responding, you can sort of do the sums, then the hours that it takes to collect the data and analyze the data and then present the report. Mike Moffat has been engaged in creating the layouts and the designs of these reports, making them really accessible through the whole way through the series. And so I just want to acknowledge him. I want to acknowledge Raylene Knowles at IGEA for producing these and making sure we get them to you on time. It's always a big project to do this research. And I want to call out Tyler Wilson, who is my colleague at Bond University, who has taken over a lot of the data analysis as we've developed over time. I'm now in a more of an executive role at the university, so this for me is a real privilege, and so I'm honored, as I said, to be here, and I'm grateful for your patience as we go through. So, of course, I won't go through everything in the report. It's a really detailed report. I want to talk about each of the main headings in the sections. So, obviously, I want to talk about the demographics, who in New Zealand is playing video games. I want to talk about families and how families are orienting to gameplay or continuing to evolve their negotiation of this amazing medium. I want to talk about why Kiwis play. I think it's important to sort of unpack and think through the motivations for play, and we've got some new data to look at here, which is really quite interesting. And then we'll talk about different age groups, the people that we actually talked to in the survey. The report is available for download now at IGEA's website, so you can download the PDF and go through and interrogate the numbers and the ideas. So I won't talk about the infographics, but the infographics are there, and you can actually, excuse me, go through and pull out the key ideas in the study just by looking at those couple of pages. I've written a summary, I won't go into it here, of the context of this moment, but I do want to point out that the arrival of generative AI and AI in just about everything we do, different types of AI, creates the requirement for digital literacy, if not digital fluency. And I strongly believe, and I've argued here, that video games have been an important part of preparing our population, preparing workers today for our digital landscape. I think that fluency, being able to use games, and then take that knowledge of interrogating and pushing games forward into things like prompt engineering, is actually not accidental. These things, I think, fit beautifully together, and I think games have been a big part of that. And of course, they've helped NVIDIA along the way. I do want to just bring the methods, which are at the back of the report, forward, just so that you can see exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about 820 New Zealand households and adults in those households responding to the survey. We have 282 parents in that second paragraph there who are represented in the survey. And we've asked about 1,309 people total in terms of all of their gameplay activities. So the person who responds to the survey, and then they nominate one other person in the household who they have good knowledge of and can represent them. And then we have a total of 1,731 Kiwis, so that's all ages represented by a catalog of who's in the household and whether or not they play and so on. So we'll get some demographics out of those. The margin of error is 3.5%, so when we get to talk about some of the numbers, how they're very close, we'll see they're not outside the margin of error. So, and the first one is the reason I need to point that out. Games are played in 9 out of 10 New Zealand households. Now, that little dip on the screen is the number that we observed, right? So 91%, a couple of years ago, it was over 92%. I'm just showing you what we've seen. It's inside the margin of error, so it's not like all of a sudden we have a decline by 1% of the number of people playing video games. That's not the case, I don't think. In fact, as I show you a little bit later, we've seen quite a broadening of the gameplay landscape. I love a lot of the quotes in the study. We know that 8 out of 10 people play video games in New Zealand. But look at this. To me, play and playing games mean creativity, connection, and discovery. It's a way for people to express themselves, build relationships, and learn without pressure. Whether it's a simple game or a complex strategy game, playing brings out joy, imagination, and even valuable life skills like teamwork, patience, and problem solving. It's not just about winning. It's about experiencing, growing, and having fun together. So this from a 23-year-old woman in Auckland, in the Auckland region. We give our participants in the study an opportunity in a couple of places to tell their story. When we ask them to tell their story, we often learn more than these numbers actually provide to us. And so what I love about doing this research and what I love about unpacking what people have to say about their learning experiences by playing games, their social experiences by playing games, their lived skills improvement experiences by playing games, we learn quite a lot. The average New Zealander today has been playing games for 14 years. That takes us back to that literacy piece and the fact that we have a lot of capability in New Zealand when we're playing games. So focusing in on these numbers again, 8 out of 10 Kiwis play games. I just think that's a really powerful statement, and they've been playing for 14 years. I won't zoom in on this slide, but game consoles are now the #1 modality and tool through which people play video games in New Zealand. When we started this research series 15 years ago, it was, of course, the PC. And we'll see this a little bit later in the data. PCs are still, for some, an important and dominant way of playing video games. Most households in New Zealand have more than one device for playing video games. So if it's not a console, it's a phone and a PC and so on. I want to point out, too, that the average age of a video game player in New Zealand is 36 years. This is the same value that we observed 2 years ago. It's sort of flatlining. And the reason, of course, it's flatlining is because the average age of Kiwis is about 37. So when you start getting to that top level and you track along the average, it starts to tell you something. Pretty much everybody's playing, more or less, across the different age groups, and we're not going to see much change unless, of course, and this is true, the average age of players around the world, and particularly in New Zealand, begins to actually grow. In other words, the population is growing in age. So if we look at the 1 to 17-year-old group, right, and this is for a lot of these folks, for all of these folks, we've asked the participants in the study to give us this information, 79% play. Within the 18 to 64-year-old age group, we know that 85% play. And then for the oldest players, 61% are playing video games. 10% of all New Zealanders who play video games are over the age of 64, so they're 65 to 94. Another way of looking at this data is to look at those 1 to 17-year-olds. Of everyone in New Zealand who plays, 4 out of 5 are adults. 4 out of 5 are adults. It is time, it is past time to get rid of those stereotypes to say that these are toys, that they're not media, that they're not serious, and that they are played only by kids, because that's just not the truth. It's not the truth. It's never been the truth. And if we break that down even further, we can see that, of course, as young people, and some people ask me, well, why do you say, if I just go back for a second, that we only have 79% of 1 to 17-year-olds playing, but we've got more adults playing in those two age groups to the right? Well, it's because the youngest children are letting us down, right? They're not actually playing because they're developmentally not ready, and their parents aren't actually providing them with that opportunity. But after that, bang, pretty much everybody's playing. What's different about this graph this year compared to previous years is that when I zoom in on it and you just kind of look at these numbers, except for 65 plus, they're all sitting up in the sort of 80% range, right? Sometimes 90%. So this is a very flat structure. In previous years, it really declined as Kiwis age. Few and fewer were playing. But now, of course, we've got a very large number playing right across the spectrum of ages. And the proportion of women who play video games in New Zealand is 47%. For the first time in the history of this research, and we're starting to see this around the world, but in Australia, that number is 51%, which tracks exactly to the population. Fascinating. In other words, pretty much video games are now absolutely the same as every other medium, and as many women as men, in effect, are playing. And go back to the margin of error, we might be there anyway, we just didn't observe it with the 820 households and the reporting from people in them. Now, this graph on the left margin has minutes played, and we take those minutes from numbers of times a day people play and how long they say they're playing, both casual games, cozy games, and also in-depth games. And the bottom axis is those age groups again. And what you're seeing is a set of lines that represent for those different ages whether or not they're playing casual games or whether they're playing in-depth games, males and females, and then the totals, right? So that light purple or mauve line that's solid is the combined gameplay for both for males, for both casual and in-depth games. And of course, as usual, we do see a spike around, early adulthood in males. But the bigger story here is, of course, that right around age 40 to 50, more women are spending more time with games than men. And we've been observing this now for 6 years, both here and in Australia. That's not the real story. The real story is those lines used to dip, right? They used to go down when we went across the ages. But look how flat that is. Look how flat that is. Older adults are playing games just about as much as younger adults and children. Also, Kiwis like playing a wide range of different types of games. We've limited the number of options they could give in the survey just so we could see some variation. Adventure, puzzle, board and card games, racing games, role-playing games, they're the top games that Kiwis enjoy playing. They vary a little bit by age, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but it's really quite clear that the educational and training games and arcade games are the ones sort of out of favor, if you will, but that's not new. That's just been the case the entire time. So these are the top genres. So if you're making a racing game, you're in with a win. This is what's really interesting to me. One of the most profound findings in this study, and that is that most Kiwis prefer to play with other Kiwis, and we'll get back to that number in a little bit. But we've asked about whether or not when you play together, do you want to be cooperative or collaborative? And look at the age differences. As we age, we play less collaboratively and more competitively. Kind of not the stereotype in mainstream media about what happens with games and what happens when people play games. And we've seen this, right? At any convention back, you'll remember, some of you, the day of big LANs in hotel lobbies and ballrooms, and you'll remember how much collaborative gameplay there was and how much people love playing together. As we age, we become more competitive. I'm not going to try to unpack that psychosocially, but we know who we are. Let's talk a little bit about families. So in New Zealand, we know that, of course, parents play video games with their kids. We've established that for many years, and I'm not going to drill into this because it's the same story, right? Games are a fun way to connect with families. Families like to spend time, parents like to spend time with their children, and children ask parents if they'll play. In fact, I was just saying to Ron, I've been playing Expedition 33 because my son said, "You'll love this game." So he sat me down, he leased out his PC to me for a week, and I had a great time. It's just part of the experience. I also want to point out that parents let their children play, the children under the age of, adolescence primarily, because they recognize that it's a great way to, have enjoyment. But it's also a great way to learn, to problem solve, and to develop cognitive skills. And of course, parents have rules for their children's gameplay. Again, we've demonstrated this over many, many years. At the very bottom, to help them develop resilience, again, we limited the responses here to just 3, but look at the range of things that we're asking parents to comment on for why they think it's great for their children to play. And sure, fun is important, but improving problem-solving skills, which is a challenge for children to develop, is right in the top 3. I just think that's profound. Again, I won't zoom in on this one, but can New Zealand adults identify the restricted classifications in the classification scheme? No, not so much. We ask them, which of these is restricted legally? And you can see that about 45% of the time, those key, except for R18, those key classifications are not accurately identified as being legally restricted. However, half of Kiwis say they're either completely or somewhat familiar with the classification scheme, so that at least they recognize these labels, which is really important. More interestingly is that the technological capabilities to manage gameplay built into consoles, into PCs, into tablets, mobile phones, as well as into the software of games, is well understood by 75% or so of Kiwis. So pretty powerful shift in the, again, digital literacy or fluency that parents have around games. So why do we play? This is the most interesting part of the study to me, because we've demonstrated over many years the numbers. We know that most players are adult. We know that the aging population is also increasingly accessing games. And we're now in the 3rd generation of gameplay. Game players. So in other words, we've had 3 generations since the arrival of games in the 1970s, commercially playing video games. Well, of course, there's no big surprise here. The main reason we play video games is we want to have fun, of course. And that shouldn't surprise any of us, and we shouldn't walk away from that because, of course, games are a source of joy when we're having fun. We know that we learn more when we're having fun. As an educator, if I can make a classroom fun, it's going to be more successful than if I make it dreadful, dreary, and oppressive. When people play video games in New Zealand and they're creating content, they're doing it because they love achieving. They love to compete with their content provision. I'm thinking here of games that are world building and, of course, scenario building. They love exploring, they love building. But to have fun, then to relax and distress, and then to pass time are the top 3 reasons why Kiwis play video games. 76% play games socially. Let me rephrase it. 24% of Kiwis only ever play games alone. So just let that sink in because it's an important figure. And what we know, and these are the Stats New Zealand sort of age bands right, we know that as we age, or we observe older and older Kiwis playing, they have an increasing preference to play alone. I think that's a problem. I also think it's an opportunity. When we have, yeah, please.
Do you think that's an increasing preference, or is that because when those people learn about games, they're all competitive and they don't really know about collaborative games as much as the younger people?
That's a great question. So the question is this something that is an increasing preference, or is it something that it results from when we originally, those older adults originally learned to play games, they were probably playing single-player games, and they were competitive environments because they were playing against the machine, right? I think there's a lot to that. I think we are trained in a certain culture of play, and I think older adults were definitely, if they're the first generation of players, they probably learned to play that way. But I would also argue that for those people who have started playing games late in life, I think there's a fear that they're not fluent enough in gameplay. They don't have the literacy. And so they want to play by themselves and hold back before they actually engage with others, thinking that someone's going to judge their twitch speed or their problem-solving skills. So it's a great question. I haven't unpacked it past this, but that is, we have had conversations about where to go with these particular data, because I think you're right, this is very interesting. For me, it's interesting because I think it's an opportunity. I think we could really push, when we have a loneliness epidemic right around the world, we could push for building games that are pulling people in to play socially where they are feeling isolation. So you could almost have and I love the title downstairs. My favorite title downstairs is Cosmorons. Such a great title for a game, but the idea that maybe there's going to be a whimsical, fun way of engaging with one another, and we don't have to worry about being. I thought Cosmoron is like you can be a moron and still have fun. So I think that idea of inviting people into gameplay with words is really important as well. And indeed, look at this quote. So playing video games is a form of social bonding, allowing me to connect and collaborate with friends all over the world. So that's a 71-year-old male from Gisborne. Right, so the Gisborne region. I think it's fascinating that when we do start to see older adults discovering the social value in the social environment of games, they actually get it and they value it. So we have demonstrated differently in past reports that we can play games for well-being, and of course playing games for personal growth is something we really wanted to focus on here in this study this year. And what we did was we just asked a whole range of reasons why people might play games for personal growth. And of course, finding joy in life is also, just like finding, social connection, is really, really important. And so that being the number one reason why people play games should be a good news story. If you don't have enough joy in your life, where can you turn? Well, there are lots of things, lots of places, lots of people and social environments, but games provide joy first and foremost. I also like this idea that games create feelings of enjoyment, they stimulate the mind, they help you manage stress, and they connect different types of people. For those top 5 reasons why, or ways we think games provide potential growth, I think that's a reason to celebrate the medium and to actually think about how we can design for those things. This year we decided we want to compare, and Tyler was particularly keen on this, the difference between young people or children and adults in terms of different ways games can improve or contribute to mental well-being. But as it turns out, and within the margin of error, what we're seeing from our participants in the study here in New Zealand is that they think, well, actually games can serve both children and adults in about equal measure for a variety of things, like building self-confidence, like developing emotional intelligence, like building resilience, and of course managing depression and anxiety and managing stress. These numbers aren't terribly different. Older and younger players, according to Kiwis responding to this survey. But what I love about this is that it says that there is a lot of potential across the age span for many different activities. I won't go into too much here, but games can be used for education, and we know that in New Zealand households, parents are saying about half of the time, yeah, our kids' school is using games for their education. So 50% of the time, games are being used in school for education. Fantastic. And for a variety of different reasons, which was on that left graph. In terms of the potential for games to help us at work, we know that between 1 in 5 and 1 in 4 Kiwis are experiencing games at work for things like training, to learn on the job, to learn a new tool, and so on. And we're going to see that a lot more, I think, now with the facility of generative AI actually pushing that capability further. The potential for games for skills development generally, cognitive skills, creative skills, teamwork skills, adults and children, not a lot of difference. Where I think we see the big difference that's statistically different is not between the age groups, but rather between the different types of skills. Communication skills and leadership skills are not perceived to be the skills that games contribute to as much as other skills, but still, 2/3 of the time. So in other words, I think New Zealanders see the positive capabilities for games. Similarly, when we start to unpack different age groups, so let's start with the 18 to 34, so these are only people who completed the survey, speaking for themselves, we see that we've got a lot of reasons why games are played and the value that they have for the players. So in this 18 to 34-year-old age group, we see that the top reasons to play are not surprisingly to have fun, to relieve boredom, to relax and de-stress, because at this stage of life, you're either busting your tail at work and you need to de-stress, or perhaps you don't have as much work as you want and you've got to fill in the time. This is not the age group that is that sandwich generation yet, where they're really time poor. And so having a break from daily life and being challenged are two other reasons. 48% of this particular age group are represented by women who play games, and then 50% by male, and then we have some lost data in between. Who do 18 to 34-year-olds play video games with socially? Friends, partners, and siblings primarily. That changes as they age. The top device for playing games, console, followed of course by mobile and then by computer or PC. If we look at basically the top reasons why people engage in games for style of gameplay, genre, action, adventure games, so that graph just there, action, adventure games, role-playing games, racing games, and reasons for playing and engaging in in-game activities, achieving, exploring, and getting lost in the story. Most make friends, they become members of community through games, and some of them even meet a spouse or a significant other or a close friend in games, about 35% of the time. Again, that figure playing competitively or cooperatively, the vast majority, 71%, want to play collaboratively. If we look at the 35 to 64-year-old age group, it's quite interesting. Let me just go back to that quote if I could. Sorry about that. Games are a place where I can hang out with my friends, go beyond the limitations of the real world, or get involved into a single-player game and its story and escape reality. Lots of options, lots of reasons, lots of benefits from games from that 20-year-old male in the Auckland region. Talking about the 35 to 64-year-old groups, top reasons for playing: to have fun, of course. That's going to be true for all the age groups. To relax or de-stress, to relieve boredom, to have a break from daily life, and to be challenged. So not different from the younger group. Elsewhere in the world and in New Zealand, we've seen, so this body of research, by the way, it's called Uses and Gratifications, why people use different media and how they get gratified by them. This is standard research or questions that are used for a variety of different media. And this is the case in much of the world that, of course, we want to see when we're playing video games that they have value beyond just having fun. But having fun is, of course, the number one reason. 50% of people who play video games in this age band are female, so we've hit that 50% mark. But again, not different beyond a shadow of a doubt because of the margin of error. Who are they playing games with socially? Their partner, their children, and friends, and they're playing on mobile phones or mobile devices, consoles, then computers. And this quote at the top is my favorite quote in the whole report, so I'm going to call it out. Pokemon Go, the Pokemon Go community has allowed me to get to know new people in my community. I've also now run 2 half marathons and 1 full marathon directly due to my fitness gained through playing Pokemon Go. So I didn't make light of it earlier, but the the lowest reason on some of the health benefits of playing games was physical fitness. Well, this person is challenging that notion. I think that's great. In this one, most people have made friends, they've stayed connected to family, and they've met people they wouldn't have otherwise met. They love achieving, and this particular group prefers puzzle games. Again, more collaborative than competitive in preference, but now we're reducing the proportion who like to play collaboratively. For our oldest players, 65 plus, it's the bottom row that's the most important here. And this fifth point now enters the picture. Oldest adults in New Zealand are playing because, among other things, and the fifth reason is they want to improve their mental health. So, just to recap, they're not playing socially as much as younger players. Right? And again, it may very well be because that's the way they learn to play. But I suspect that mental health opportunity is one that we really need to focus on when we're developing and thinking about selling games to this age group, because this is where there's a lot of opportunity. They're playing with friends, partners, and children. 46% female, so as we age, we see that there's just a fewer proportion, but more women are playing longer than men at this age group. They're playing on computers. I said earlier when we started this research, it was the PC that was the main device. And again, going back to your question, which I think was excellent, is it because that's what I've learned to play early on? And in fact, in New Zealand, that is the case. Final slide. So this quote, "It's an outlet for my competitive spirit, driving me to achieve high scores and complete games with 100% completion." 68-year-old female from the Gisborne region. And of course, they want to stay connected to friends. That's, of course, the reason that they're playing games if they are playing socially. They've become involved in community, and they've met somebody they wouldn't have otherwise met. Achieving is their number one in-game activity, and they're playing board and card games, and now we're down to 59% competitive play. So in summary, I think we know quite a lot about New Zealanders, who's playing, how they play as families, and why they play. There's a lot more in the report. I want you to, if you can, download it, look through it. Feel free to contact me or particularly IGEA if you have questions about the report and want some more explanation. We'd be happy to provide that. The most important thing to point out now is that we've been doing this research, as Ron said, for the better part of 15 years. We've got 9 iterations of the reports. We have a very good picture of what's happening. When people criticize research like this, it's because they say, well, you've just seen these numbers. How do you know that they're true? Because, these seem really quite fantastic in many respects. People are very positive about games. But over time, we demonstrate the pattern. And it hasn't changed. They've aged, yes. More women are playing, sure. And the amount of play is stable across age groups. But we've observed that over many years, and if you look at that one graph that I showed you with the minutes on the vertical axis and the ages on the horizontal axis and all the different amounts of gameplay across the ages, that used to really spike and then drop. It's now flat. Why is it flat? Because New Zealand plays. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. We've got some time for Q&A. So if you've got a question, John's hand was straight up. We'll just wait for a microphone for the filming. Jeff will answer most of them. My job is to say thanks, Jeff, when he's been talking for too long. So,
look, always great to see this. As we know, in New Zealand and in Australia, we're predominantly an export market. So what can we read from this when we are looking at building games because we're building them for export? What data do we have on other countries?
Yeah. Do you want to take the business side, or you want me to do the demographic side first?
You can start, then I can.
Hi, John. Anyway, it's good to see you again. So your question, as you said, is, what can we take for this if we want to export games to the world, right? So these data are quite consistent with the English language market. So that's the first thing. And we know from comparing whether it's Canada or Europe, ISFI, you know, the wide range of studies there, that the export market looks a lot like the New Zealand market. The audience is aging, more older people in the audience are playing, more women are playing, and I think, and I didn't make light of it, but the democratization of games as a result of the mobile platform environment has been profound, and it has opened up games to women, although I would argue party games did that in the, you know, the early noughties. And we know that developers have a lot more options to get games at scale out to consumers. I think from these data, if, you know, if I'm betting, we're going to have quite a few adults in the over 50 age range who are looking for distinctive experiences that speak to them, particularly I think as the job market around the world tightens, and I think they're going to look for, look, quite frankly, I'm waiting for retirement so I can play more. So I would be looking at that market as well, because you'll have a lot of first generation players and new players at that age group, and they're probably two different groups that are really keen to play. I would be looking at the older adult market. But obviously, I wouldn't aim too high because that starts to get quite small when you get up to the over 80, let's say. But look, I think there's a great opportunity. The only other opportunity I would identify here is there is starvation, I think, for positive social interaction. Obviously, the jaundiced geopolitical environment, which has certainly upset me greatly, and probably many of you, is one in which we could probably do a lot to calm through games. That's what I'm hearing in these data. Thanks, John.
Well, we'll be releasing over the next month, John, a report called The Power of Play, and it's a look of 12, I'm looking at Raylene, 12 countries, 16 countries, with very similar data. So it'll go across a number of territories through Asia, UK, Europe, and the US. So it'll give a bigger snapshot than this. And just, Jeff did mention, the report is on IGEA.net. You can download it there. So it has...
Kia ora. Hey, I guess before the question, for people interested in older adult games, academic Bob DeShooter, who I think is at Northeastern now, did some great GDC talks about designing games for older adults and wrote some great papers. The question I have is, under your top 5 reasons to play, number 2 was to relax and de-stress, but 5 was to escape, and escape didn't really show up in the age groups, but those two combined, did that edge up even higher? Because they seem very similar, at least the way I approach games.
Yeah, so de-stress is obviously quite specifically to calm down. Escape could be to have fantasy, right? Yeah. So, yeah, no, thanks. It's a great question. We've actually, over the years, sorry, what's your name? Jeremy. Thanks, Jeremy. Look, over the years, we've tried to extend or push the uses and gratifications research. We wanted to do that academically as well as to provide better audience data. And so we were asking about a number of different, and other academics have done the same, different uses and gratifications of media, but particularly of games. And we at one stage tried about 10 different reasons. There are the top 5 that we've mentioned here. The traditional research has 6. And so what we found was they just never mattered. These top 5 across media are the reason. The only one we don't add here that's in news media is to surveil or to have knowledge of what's happening in the world, obviously. So that one doesn't come up, and we have tried it in the past because, of course, you know, there was this intersection with, I think, in the sort of the GameCube, or maybe it was the Wii era, but Nintendo was playing with like news on a globe, you'll remember? Yeah. So that was the only intersection, and we put it in there and it didn't matter. So these are very stable over time. And again, I think that escape is really a fantasy piece. And we see that sometimes in the quotes. I just want to go to fantastic worlds. I'm a tourist gamer myself. I love getting into virtual worlds. Expedition 33, as I mentioned, is one of those, right? So, and you can play old man mode, so it's not as, you know, you don't have to be as fast with your Twitch speed. And so, look, I think that is one reason why people play, is just to have that escape. But can escape, as you say, be correlated with de-stressing? Absolutely. Yeah, thanks. That's great, Jeremy.
Stephen, we'll just get a mic.
I should thank Mike and Emma for the audio. It's been perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Kia ora, Dr. Jeff. Thank you very much for travelling over to see us again.
Good to see you again, Steve.
You had some statistics in there about the amount of time people were spending playing. I suppose my question is about like their intensity in playing, and there's kind of two trends that we've been talking about in our studio, and one is the trend for people to main a game. There's one game that they play consistently. So in my extended family, it might be Fortnite on one hand, or the older female generation, maybe it's Candy Crush.
Yeah.
And so maybe the number of games they're playing has narrowed, or they've got a main and a secondary game, and that's what changes out. And then also, just when we talk about the amount of time they're spending gaming, we've been discussing like the competition with other forms of media. So for instance, is the competition for Candy Crush actually TikTok or short form video? Do you have any data or insights on those trends?
Yeah, that's great questions. It's a real interesting pairing, right? I'll deal with the TikTok one first. So we don't have any data on it. We didn't ask any questions. We have in the past asked questions about other media being used. We decided we didn't want to focus too broadly this time. And so I'm sorry, I don't have those data, but I want to then go to, but I think there is real competition there, obviously. They are, and now going to your first question, there are certain kinds of habitual activities and habit-forming activities that are calming, and it goes back really to Jeremy's question as well. I think if we're trying to de-stress and relax, sometimes the best way to do that is with familiarity and not to be challenged. Even though we hear, and we've got it in the data, you know, New Zealanders want to be challenged by games. It's one of the main reasons we play. And actually, it's interesting, as we age, we want a little bit more engagement and challenge. However, I think there's a lot of comfort, particularly when, I don't know, a president of a particular country starts to threaten the health of the world. We want to just get into a really simple environment that we know well and we habituate to it. Great if you're obviously drawing revenue from that habitual play. But if you're a single, point of sale or single sale, game, it's a bit frustrating that there might have been another opportunity there. I think the reality is that the audience ebbs and flows in its ability and its willingness to take risks and to explore. And we've seen a narrowing in other media. A lot of the research I'm reading shows that people are sticking to one social media platform more than another, so they're going there and sticking. They're staying on one network or one television series because they love that, and they're binging to kind of stay familiar. I'm thinking people in my age group doing things with MASH, I'll go back to MASH repeatedly because Hawkeye was funny. And it's comforting somehow, it's a balm. I think as we see games come out that can compete potentially with those dominant titles, they're going to struggle to get oxygen. But I think the audience will come back around and they'll get bored eventually and realize they'll snap out of it like they do with social media platforms, and they'll go to another one as the opportunity arises. I don't know if that answers your question. I don't have the data here, but I know from social behavior and other studies that you get that habituation and then exploration, and they're constantly sort of swinging.
Yep, and I suppose just how we talk about that is that's the community building effect of games in action. If you join a community, of course you hang around in it for a long time, and it becomes that habit.
Exactly, very good point. That social glue is just critical, and I think that's why also when you build a community in games, there's a real switching cost, isn't there, to switching out of that. Having said that, I think games, particularly casual games, are a way of moving in and out without a lot of cost. It's just those in-depth environments that are probably more tricky. And losing your avatar, that's devastating, especially if it has hair. All right.
Are there any other questions?
Jeremy wants to go again. Hang on for the mic. Hold on.
It's for the recording. Yeah.
For academics, is there a way to get more data so that we could do our analysis on the data that you have, or is there any way to collaborate on that?
Well, so the data are proprietary. They are. So I meant to say we use Qualtrics to get the data. So a very robust panel. The amount of time that it would take to collaborate at the moment, I'll just be honest with you, because I'm in an executive role at the university, I've got about zero bandwidth. In fact, this, as I say, is quite a luxury, and I'm delighted to be here, and I'm honored. But I think the ability to collaborate would be very hard.
Sure.
Yeah. I know that Tyler has an interest in, because he's early in his career, he has quite an interest in doing more research in this space, so I can hook you up with him. Okay. And I think that might be a really good opportunity, Jeremy. And
Thank you very much.
Lovely guy.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we might wrap it up there. Just a reminder that Jeff and I will be just outside here in the, I'm not sure what it's called now. Yes, Raylene? The drop-in zone, thank you very much. So we'll be there for about half an hour if anyone wants to ask any more questions or interrogate the data anymore. Thank you for getting up early this morning and coming in. I know it's a bit of a chore on a Saturday. Thank you, Jeff. I know how busy you are, and coming over here on a Saturday has been fantastic. And enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.